So there was one package that I failed to mention when we were installing Apache and PHP, is that you also need to install PHP5-GD. That's the graphics library for WordPress to resize images. Now I know we said we need to put these servers into a load balancer, but we're going to hold off on that for now because these need a database to talk to. So we're going to create an RDS server. But before we do, we need to create a new security group. So we'll go into security groups, and this is going to be the security group for the database server. So we'll call this AWS tutorial series WordPress RDS. We'll launch it within our VPC. So this is where it gets a little complicated. You can set specific rules for which servers can talk to each other. So in this case, we only want the EC2 servers to be able to talk to the database server. We don't want anyone in the world to be able to access these servers unless you're the actual WordPress application server. So we're going to allow only inbound MySQL traffic from a custom IP, and we're going to set that custom IP to be the WordPress EC2 server. So this SG854 is the group ID for this security group above here. And all outbound is fine. So now that that's created, we'll go to the Services tab, click on RDS, and we're going to get started with our first database server. But before we do, we need to create a subnet group. In this subnet group, AWS tutorial series subnet, you can just copy that down. We're going to select our default VPC. We're going to say the availability zone is 1A, and we'll give it this subnet, and we'll click add. You don't really need to know exactly what's going on here, but basically this says anytime you launch a database server, you're going to be launching it into this subnet. And in later videos, when I go over VPC network, this will kind of really come into play because you can launch your database servers within multiple different availability zones in public and private subnets. Oh, so it looks like we have to add 2 availability zones. So we'll add B as well. I guess they must want to fall back. So now that that's created, we're going to launch our database instance. MySQL, we're going to say no to multi-AZ deployment. We'll just have this again as a T2 micro, just a really small server. We'll use our existing VPC. Storage type, 5 gigabytes is fine. Obviously, in a production environment, you're going to need a much larger server. WordPress can get pretty big depending on how much traffic you're getting in there. And then we're going to make these all the same, AWS tutorial series. This is just so we can log into the server. Looks like it must be less than 16, so we'll just call this AWS tutorial. There we go. So now we've already created our subnet. We could say publicly accessible no. That means that these are going to go over the private network. Let's just say yes, just because I honestly can't remember which subnet I launched the other servers in. You can say 1A, and we're going to select RDS as our security group. Database name, we'll just keep it as AWS tutorial. And for this, we're not going to back anything up. Obviously, in a production environment, you will. Auto minor version upgrade, yes, that's totally fine. And no preference on the window. You might want to set this to something, in the morning time, like 3 a.m., just so you know there's not going to be a lot of traffic. Oh, so looks like we cannot create a publicly accessible one. Sorry, my bad on that, so we'll go ahead and launch. All right, so this is going to take a minute to create, and once this does, we'll set up our WordPress configuration.